I have another why basic strategy video for you today where we go over 3 different hands of blackjack, and we're going to kind of find out the why or the math behind the decisions that basic strategy tells us to make here. All right, so this first hand is kind of interesting. We have an 11 versus a dealer's 10. All right, now what does basic strategy tell us to do in this situation? Well, here we should actually double down. All right, and we would double, and the dealer would play out their hand after us getting just exactly one more card. Okay, that is what we should do. In fact, I'll just leave that out there so you can remember that we're doubling. And the real question though is why? And to figure out that, I'm going to put up 1/4 of a deck here. This is all the spades. All right, so we have 2 through ace of all of our spades. We're going to use this to kind of help us think about the math, as this ratio of cards should be the same throughout all the decks, whether you're playing double deck or 6 deck, right? Whatever, 8 deck. Since 1/4 of a deck is the same as another 1/4 of a deck, and that's same for the ratio all the way through, it should not affect kind of the math behind what's going on. All right, besides the few cards that are actually out in play, and of course the ones along in the dealer's discard tray. All right, so that said, if I have an 11 here, what will help me? And you might want to think of this in terms of a lot of times when we get to a hard 17 is when we start to stand on a lot of those hands. For example, if you look at the basic strategy chart, you can see that it says that at a hard 17, you stand on everything, no matter what the dealer's up card is. So if that's true, if I have an 11, which card is going to get me to a hard 17? And that's, of course, going to be a 6, right? 6 plus 11 is 17. And so everything higher than that, except for an ace, will help me here, right? That's going to get me into that range where you would consider that to be probably a successful double down. All right, if you disagree with that, you can let me know in the comments. You might not think 17 is that great. That's fine. Let me know. But how many cards is that? Of our 13 total, right, 2 through ace, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, where 4 of those 8 specifically are going to give us 21, the best hand you can get. All right, or the best total, I should say, you can get. And so 8 out of 13 is incredibly good. That's why when you have an 11 versus a dealer's 2 through ace in an H17 game, 2 through 10 in an S17 game, you want to double down. All right, and specifically here against a 10, we're going to double that down. All right, now you might think, well, sure, if they, or if you, I should say, get a 17, the kind of the lowest of those totals, wouldn't the dealer still be likely to get a 20 under here? And, well, let's see just how likely they are. I'm going to put that 6 back so it doesn't affect our math. And what is the likelihood of them getting, of them beating us if I were to draw the lowest card? All right, and if I did, then, of course, they would only need an 18 to beat us, and an 18, a 19, 20, and all these are 20s, or really, they would also get to use the ace. That is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So they actually have a less chance of beating us if we were to draw just 17 than us getting that 17 or higher to begin with. Okay, so now that said, that is true. They might do that, but we are also, 6. If I were to draw that and get 17 here, that's just one of the possibilities that would kind of land us in that kind of helpful range, right? There's a whole lot of other cards that are very much more helpful, and so the dealer, they may or may not pull a 10 and beat us here. But when you start with an 11, you do have the advantage, as there are so many cards that can get you into that great range. All right, so that's kind of the first reason why. Now, of course, with any of these, if you disagree or if you kind of have other reasons as to why you think you should double down on 11s, say, versus dealer's 10, or the other cards, the other hands we're going to talk about today, please let me know that down in the comments. All right. Also, if you want to see a different hand and you want to know the math behind that, I'll do my best to answer. But that's going to bring us to our second hand today, a pair of 9s versus a dealer's 7. This is another one that gets misplayed quite a bit. Basic strategy, if you remember, for 9s, a pair of 9s are split against the dealer's 2 through 9, except for 7. Why? All right. Why is that the case? Again, I'm going to lay out all our possible dealer's up cards here. And just again, kind of 1/4 of the deck. So let's think about this for a second. We want to split nines usually because 18 is pretty good hand, right? It kind of falls, like I was saying earlier, within that range of hard 17 or higher. But by splitting them, a lot of times against especially our lower dealers up cards, we have the potential of drawing, a 10 or maybe even a 2 for a double down opportunity and getting that out there. But against a 7, why does it say except? It's a 2 through 9 except 7 that we should split our nines. Why? And a 7 here, well, 18 versus a 7, there's only one card, an ace, that if that was going to be the dealer's bottom card, that would push with us, all right? An 18 versus a soft 18, they would have to stand here. That's going to be a push. The rest of the cards, right? We have 4 cards that are 10 valued cards. If the dealer draws a 17, again, they have to stand. And my 18 would beat them, and we would win $100 or whatever our bet was at that point. Okay? The only time that we're going to get into a little bit of trouble is if the dealer draws something that's less than 10, which, there's a good chance of that happening. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of those cards that are less than a 10 valued card. So let's say they do. Let's say they draw one less, which is a 9. Well, that gives them 16, which is the worst starting total that they could start off with, and then they're likely to bust with anything from a 6 or higher after that. Okay, I guess not an ace. But so that said, what if they get something, maybe lower? All right, probably the best they could start with is a 7-4. Then they do have a chance of winning here, but you can see that if they draw a 10, you're gonna win with your 18. If they draw an ace, you're going to push, and then anything less, there is some definitely good chances of them busting. So a lot of things have to go right for them in order for you to lose your 18 versus their 7. All right, so that is why we don't split against a 7. It's the only one in that range 2 through 9 that we do not split against. The other ones we would split to try to get more money on the table because we have the advantage. That kind of brings me to my next point here before we get to our last pair that we're going to look at, and that's going to be all of these are going to be strategies that you can learn on blackjackapprenticeship.com. They're so gracious to sponsor today's video. So they have drills on their site that you can practice basic strategy on. If you're past basic strategy, you can use their site to help practice deviations. Eventually there's a test out portion, which is my favorite. I like to do a few test outs per week just to keep myself sharp. And that way I am using my deviations, my basic strategy, along with a bet spread as I play. But besides just practicing on there, they also have a video course that Colin Jones has put together. He is a fantastic teacher, and he kind of goes through the game from A to Z, all right, where some of those last few videos even deal with the casino relations and your act in the casino, and how you can better get more money on the table and kind of even have a little bit of longevity at the tables if you do things the right way. All right. Besides that, there's the Casino 411, which tells you if you're planning blackjack trips, maybe where you want to go, where you want to avoid, some places that have little to no heat versus places that maybe have a lot of heat. What their limits are, their table limits, as well as, of course, if it's 3 to 2 or 6 to 5, we want to avoid the 6 to 5, and what the penetration is at those particular tables. All right. And then what I think is probably the best part about Blackjack Apprenticeship is the pro betting software. To me, that's worth just the price of it alone, as it will tell you exactly what to bet and which true counts so that you can become a winning player faster, and you can get to that long run faster by putting out the correct amounts and sort of curbing your variance over time. Right, so again, thank you to blackjackapprenticeship.com for sponsoring today's video. That brings me to our last hand that we're going to go over, and that's going to be a pair of 4s versus a dealer's 4. I've been getting probably the most comments about this one on my channels, both Instagram and YouTube. And that is because a lot of people are saying that we should double down here. All right. And that is absolutely not the case. All right. In fact, you should probably never double down your 4s versus the dealer's 4, except in a few very, very rare instances, which we'll talk about in a second. All right. But first off, that leaves us with a couple other decisions. Should we split, or should we just hit? And what does basic strategy say to do? Well, a pair of 4s are only split against a dealer's 5 and 6. not against the dealer's 4. So because of that, we're going to just hit this and take one more card, hopefully just one more card, and get like a nice total of 18 or maybe even a soft 19. And then we would stand on that. However, why would we do that? Why are we not going to split this? Why are we not going to double down? What does the math say behind this hand? And let's think about this for a second. And first off, again, I'm going to cherry pick some cards here. If this was a dealer's hard 8, right, instead of a pair of 4s, basic strategy is going to say kind of the same thing, right? You're just going to hit this. In fact, the deviation to double down on a hard 8 versus a dealer's 4 is so high that I don't even include it in my top 30 deviations. I think it probably exists, but it's not one that you need to know. The difference between hitting and doubling down at a count of, it's probably up at around 7 or 8 or so, is probably negligible, okay? So again, just learn to hit this hand whether you have a hard 8 or a pair of 4s, all right? But that brings us to the next point. Why don't we split it, right? When you split, sometimes you can, draw a 7 and get an 11 and then maybe double down on that to potentially get more money out on the table. Why wouldn't I want to do that here? And the real simple answer is that 8 is a pretty good starting hand, right? 8, 9, 10, 11, those are all relatively high. When you take one more card, you're likely to get a decent total, and then you would stand. Whereas if I split up my 8, now it becomes 2 4s. 4 really isn't a good starting hand. The reason being is if you pull a 10 valued card, now all of a sudden you have 14. That's not very good. You're going to stand on the 4, but you probably don't want to, right? There's a lot more cards that could get you closer to 21. And so we don't really want to do that. We don't want to start at a 4 usually ever. So if I can keep this at an 8, that's going to be a lot more beneficial to me than a 4. In fact, especially getting double the money out to play again with 2 4s. You don't want to split your 4s. Okay, you're going to keep it as an 8, and then we can just take one more card. The dealer play out their hand, and hopefully you would win with starting with an 8 as a 4. Dealer is relatively likely to bust for the same reason we were by splitting our 4s, right? We don't want to do that. We want to pin them with the 4. Right, so hopefully you liked today's video. If you do, please give me a thumbs up down below, and then do 2 things for me. 1, maybe tell me which hand you want to see next in the next of these basic strategy videos. And then 2, if you are interested, please check out Blackjack Apprenticeship. I'll put their link down in the pinned comment of this video. Give them a chance, right? They are incredibly good. If you want to have any success at this blackjack thing, Blackjack Apprenticeship is the way you want to go.